Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new movie franchise ranking video here on Max Talks Movies. My name is Max Denberg. Today, with Inside Out 2 coming out and the head of Pixar, Pete Docter, saying that the Pixar will be moving forward more into sequels and reboots, I'm going to time to stop and rank all 10 sequels, prequels, or spin-offs that Pixar has done so far. So welcome back to the channel. If you're new, I'm Max Denberg. Please subscribe and ring that bell for notifications. We're growing very quickly. Join the train in the comments by subscribing and ring that bell for notifications. Sorry for messing up there. I talk all things movies, TV shows, and I do rankings, and I talk box office daily here. Daily videos here on the channel, so please subscribe and ring that bell if you're new to the channel. Comment down below, what are your ranking of the Pixar spin-offs or sequels that I'm ranking here today? Is it a good idea for Pixar to continue to focus on sequels or reboots, or should they focus more on original content? Let me know in the comment section down below. Give me your ranking as well. It's all subjective rating. Don't want to have people fighting each other in the comment section. I would love to hear everyone's opinion, especially with Pixar, because everyone has a very different idea of each of their movies, and it hits people differently depending on the message or the characters. So I know that my list is not the right list, but it's just my list. Also, please like the video, guys. The thumbs up button, that's how you support this channel. So without further ado, let's break down the top 10 movies. This is sequels, spin-offs, and prequels. We do have a prequel in there. So this does, for example, count Lightyear, Monsters University, as well as Finding Dory, a part of these sequels that I'm going to be ranking here today. So let's get into the 10 Pixar sequels. Starting at number 10 for me is easily Cars 2. It is easily also the worst Pixar film as well. Cars 2 is just the wrong direction to go. And this is not coming from someone who loves the first Cars movie. There's definitely some nostalgia with that first Cars movie, but it's not for me anywhere close to top tier Pixar. But Cars 2 was the wrong direction to go with the franchise, where Lightning takes a major back seat in the movie. And we kind of do this spy espionage thing with Mater being the lead character. And I think Mater is a fun enough side character in these movies, but he is certainly not a lead character. And I think once you took Lightning McQueen away from the spotlight, I mean, he is really put on the sidelines in this film. And Mater is an annoying lead character, but fun side character. And the moment they put him in the lead, going the spy espionage route, wasn't a big fan of, because it kind of took us away from the heart of the first movie, which, yes, is about racing. And yes, there's some racing elements in Cars 2, but because we're trying to do this undercover spy thing with Mater, the racing element is lost, and that's why Cars 2 is at number 10. Coming in number 9 is Finding Dory, which I think is another just, I don't think Finding Nemo ever garnered a sequel. While Finding Dory did get to the $1 billion club and people obviously care, it's more because of the love of the first movie. But to do a sequel, and because the first one's called Finding Nemo, we need to find someone else. And in this time, Dory gets lost, and another character who I just don't think is a strong enough lead character. Marlin is the lead of the first film. Of Dory, again, coming in as a side character. But once again, because Dory goes missing and we're trying to learn about her family, even though she's the one missing, she is clearly the lead character of the movie. And Dory was not one of my favorite characters from Finding Nemo. The backstory, what the movie was going for were questions that no one wanted, especially if you love Finding Nemo. Yes, Dory was a nice side character to add into the family dynamic of Marlin and Nemo. You have the turtles. They were a lot of fun. I think here, the squid here is also Hank is tons of fun in this movie. But overall, it's just the story that I don't think it warranted a sequel. And I've been hearing that they're trying to reboot possibly Finding Nemo. Don't know what you do with this franchise, but I don't even think it should be a franchise. The concept is really only good enough for one movie, and Finding Dory showed that in 2016. Coming in at number 8 is a movie I had higher on this list when it came out. The more I've rewatched it, I've seen this movie 3 times, it is further down this list, and that is Lightyear, which is a movie that I enjoyed in theaters 2 years ago. I've seen the movie 2 more times, and I really don't like this movie now. I was didn't mean I loved it the first time I saw it. I was more divisive, leading positive, leaning that was kind of okay. But the more I watch it, I don't care about this movie being a movie that got Andy into Lightyear and why Buzz became such a big toy, and also because the movie itself is a very formulaic story they've seen a billion times. I really don't like the idea of the twist at the end with an older Buzz being Zurg. I think that absolutely kills the third act of the movie. While I think the movie was passable at best in the first two acts, I do think the third act really does derail this movie when we're having a deconstruction of Buzz Lightyear. And I don't think any kid would think that was interesting enough to get a Buzz Lightyear toy. And us seeing four Toy Story movies later, I don't think a deconstruction of Buzz Lightyear in the movie world, I don't think is that interesting as well. I think they also should have gotten Tim Allen back to voice his character. I know the political stuff of Tim Allen, but I think Chris Evans was definitely okay in the movie, but it just never felt like this was Buzz Lightyear whatsoever. When I was rewatching the movie. It looks gorgeous, but as I said, the third act just derails this movie, and it's very unfortunate. At number 7 for me is Cars 3, which again is my bottom tier of Pixar, but I do get more enjoyment of this. I actually like rewatching this the most out of the three Cars films. And again, I don't rewatch these movies a lot, but I do think actually Cars 3 is my favorite of the three movies from an enjoyment perspective. But again, this movie is still not a very good movie. It still has a lot of ripoffs. It's very much taking Rocky 3 with, Lightning having to train another car to enter the fray. The villain's kind of a stereotypical, I'm a good racer, I'm just going to beat Lightning McQueen, the old Lightning McQueen. You've seen this story a billion times. It's very formulaic. It won't even surprise kids, kind of the way it goes throughout the entire movie. But for me, there's still a little bit of some enjoyment in here, especially I think this is leaps and bounds better than Cars 2. But still, this is not a great or even good movie. But still, I've had fun with it. But it's a formula that I've seen done a billion times. And still, this franchise, the Cars franchise as a whole, is one that I really don't enjoy for the most part. Big leap up here from the first four movies that I've already talked about to number 6, and that is Monsters University, which I like. I seem to like more than most people. It's not a great movie. It doesn't touch Monsters Inc., but Monsters University, I've always had a fun time. It's an easy movie to watch. Yes, it's not this mind-blowing message, sit down, get emotional, crying movie that a lot of people think the first one is. This is just a fun time showing us how Mike and Sully met in college. The scare scene towards the end, I really enjoy the dynamic. Learning how Randall becomes that villain in Monsters Inc. is also tons of fun. The actual group that the fraternity that Mike and Sully are in are also, it's a great group of characters. Yes, it doesn't have that message and it's not that deep and it can kind of seem forgettable. It's actually Pixar usually didn't make those movies like this back when Pixar was in its prime, but I think this is definitely a solid prequel to a movie that I absolutely adore, and this doesn't hurt the original at all, and I absolutely still enjoy my experience watching Monsters University. One of the easiest movies to rewatch without having to think too much watching Pixar. At number 5 for me is The Incredibles 2, which has become very divisive now almost 6 years later from its release. Once again, do not think this movie touches the original Incredibles movie. It's funny, the people who love this movie think it's better than the first Incredibles, and people think that if you don't think it's better than the first Incredibles, you don't like it. I actually think this is a really good sequel to Incredibles 1. I think this is the right direction to go with the franchise where, once again, the Incredibles save the day, but again, supers are not seen in society still as these good things for society. But the inclusion of Bob Odenkirk's character trying to bring supers back, I think going the role reversal from the first movie where it was Mr. Incredible who goes in the field and Elastigirl stays home as the mom protecting the kids. This time around, I love the idea of flipping that with Elastigirl being the lead of the movie and Bob being home taking care of the kids. Jack is a lot of fun in this movie, and the animation is gorgeous for Incredibles 2. The problem here is the villain. The setup for Screenslaver is very good, but the reveal on Bob Odenkirk character's sister, voiced by Catherine Hahn, and it definitely derails the movie from being fantastic. I still think it's an excellent sequel, but I think the villain is the clear issue with the movie. and Syndrome is such a far superior iconic villain. And to go from that to kind of Screenslaver, well, like for example, when Screenslaver came on screen for the first time, I said, this is a very interesting villain. But once the twist is revealed, that character became less and less interesting as the movie went on, and you didn't care and feel like that Screenslaver was a threat to our family. So very good sequel. I wish we got more Incredibles. Don't want to see this rebooted, though, as Pete Docter said they might do. Not number 4 for me is the newest sequel, which is Inside Out 2. I did a full review and out of theater reaction, so I'm going to keep it brief. I love this movie, and I don't think it's as good as the first one, slightly, but the inclusion of the anxiety emotion, being a teenager, it definitely hit me. I was definitely in the feels in the theater, and then later that day, I was kind of thinking about the message and what it meant to me, and I did get very emotional and choked up thinking about the impact that this movie had on me, because I am someone who, I've been very open, deals with anxiety on a daily basis, and the way this movie handles it, the way Riley, even me talking about it now, can get me not emotional, but definitely in the feels. But the way Riley, they show Riley go through anxiety, and the messaging of anxiety. The reason why it hit me too was I think it's a really good message for kids. Kids normally associate anxiety with a bad message. And I think the movie does a really strong job that, yes, anxiety kind of is like the antagonist, I would say. For parts of the movie, the more you uncover, again, this is not spoilers, the more you realize that it's the other thing. And I really enjoyed the messaging with that character, the inclusion of Maya Hawke and Ayo Edebiri was really good. The animation was just jaw-dropping gorgeous. You can see that $200 million budget on screen. I think this was a perfect follow-up. And someone who grew up with the first one, again, I was 13 when the first movie came out, and now here I am 9 years later talking about the sequel. Both movies are awesome and definitely top tier Pixar for me. Let's get into the top 3, which are the only 3 movies on this list that are firmly in my top 10 of Pixar in general. At number 3 for me is Toy Story 2. These 3 movies I just adore. I watch it every year. Toy Story 2 is a really good follow-up to the original Toy Story film, dealing with the inclusion of Jessie, who was a character that I really didn't like as a kid, but the more I watch these movies, especially this one, the Jessie reveals, why, how she got put in the situation, and the song that Randy Newman performs, and that whole sequence is really heartbreaking. And the more I've rewatched it, the more heartbreaking it gets. But the dynamic continues here between Woody and Buzz. For me, this is by far and away the weakest villain that we've had. The Prospector is still a very solid villain, but there are some iconic Pixar villains in this Toy Story franchise, and the Prospector has not always interested me as much as the other 3 movies in the franchise as it pertains to villains. But still, the messaging is really great. The comedy, Woody seeing his old person, and maybe he doesn't want to be a specific toy for a person, but wants to inspire all these children. But the realization of what was actually going on, Buzz never giving up on Woody after, what happened in the first movie. I love the opening sequence of Buzz, the Buzz's video game, which I think is so much fun. The Zurg bit in the movie is hilarious. The monsters and the toys driving the car to the airport. There's so many just iconic moments. You have the chicken, the guy who dresses up as the chicken, and Gerald's game from not Gerald's game. I forget, Jerry, I think maybe that's the character's name from the short, working on Woody. There's so many iconic moments in this movie, but for me, it's not as good as the other 2 films on this list. At number 2 for me is Toy Story 4, which is going to probably be my hottest take on this list, because it seems that people have really backed off their enjoyment of this movie since its release in 2019. This movie is very special to me because, again, I'll talk about how great of a movie Toy Story 3 is in a second. Toy Story is my favorite franchise of all time. I was even nervous. Would a 4th Toy Story movie work? And I think the movie does an excellent job answering me the question very early in the movie, why this movie's even happening. And that's because the trilogy of the Toy Story movies is an Andy story. The toys serving Andy and getting Andy to college. And Andy goes to college, and that ends Andy's part of the saga. But that doesn't mean that Woody and Buzz and even Bo Peep don't have to conclude their stories. And what happens next to these characters with Bonnie. And I do have cried every time I've seen this movie towards the end with the last goodbye between Woody and Buzz. It does hit me every single time. But the Bo Peep was a very forgettable one-note character in the first two Toy Story films, wasn't even in the third one. But the relationship between Woody and her is great. Gabby is a complex antagonist who obviously turned out to be good towards the end of the movie, but she's a very fascinating antagonist. Just wants a battery, whatever it is, to fit her back so she can, how Woody's thing can pull and say catchphrases. She wants the same thing. Very interesting. The best new characters of these sequels are in this movie as well. Duke Kaboom with Keanu Reeves. You have Key and Peele as the stuffed animals at the fair. Are really good characters as well. The sergeants as well, voiced by Carl Weathers. There's really good side characters that they add in this movie. Duke Kaboom makes you laugh every single time. I do think this is the best looking Pixar film that's also they've ever made. Now, I am very nervous about a Toy Story 5 because I think this movie did, close the door on especially the Woody dynamic with the other toys. And I do wish this movie had a bit more Buzz in it, but I'm a big Woody fan. It's my favorite cinematic character of all time. And this is his movie, so that's why it's at number 2. But coming in number 1 for me is Toy Story 3, which is not just number 1 on this list. It's my number 2 overall for Pixar, and it's one of the best animated films of all time. No wonder that it was also nominated for Best Picture. This is one of the most fascinating experiences I've ever had with a movie. When it originally came out, I loved it. Obviously, I was a big Toy Story fan, but it hit me totally different during COVID, because during COVID, I was going into college, and just like I was going into college when I watched the movie during COVID, Andy was going into college, and the movie hit me so much differently on an emotional level when I was going into college and Andy was going into college. And obviously, when the movie came out in 2010, I think this was 2010. I was 8 years old. It's totally different because I couldn't relate to what Andy was going through. But when I could relate to what Andy was going through, this movie has reached a whole nother level of greatness, in my opinion, because they really nailed that. Lotso, one of the most iconic villains, not just in Pixar or animation, just in movie history as well. Ken with Michael Keaton's a very fun Ken into this movie that I love. You have Woody with the other toys at this daycare. Buzz turning into these different languages was tons of fun. It's a very kind of dark movie at times with Lotso, who he's a villain all the way through. He thought he would save him at the end, and I think everyone in the theater, especially when I was 8 years old, thought that, man, the toys might not make it out of the situation. They obviously do, but this movie, I get very choked up talking about it. I get very emotional watching it now every time I watch it, because I've seen it now 4 or 5 times since I've been in college, and it just hits. If you've experienced college or going into college and what you lose when you go to college and the things you want to leave behind and one things you'll cherish for the rest of your life, it is just very emotionally satisfying. So it is a great trilogy, and this is one of the best third films of a trilogy of all time. So that is my ranking of all the Pixar sequels, spin-offs, and prequels. What are your thoughts on my ranking? What's your ranking in the comment section down below? More videos coming soon. I'll see you guys soon.